Welcome to 4RG Meets. My name is Beth McKinley, and I've been a member of For Our Grandchildren for, I guess it'd be about a year now. And I've really enjoyed meeting the wonderful people who are part of For Our Grandchildren, for the networking, for the knowledge, for the wisdom that I have gained from them. So 4RG Meets is one of the ways that we disseminate information. We also have Facebook group, Facebook page. We have a newsletter. But this monthly meeting we are doing on the second Tuesday of the month. And if you have received a link by emailing us, that is the same link that you'll use every month. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the ancestral lands and waters of the Anishinaabe Mississauga here in Peterborough. I know you are not all from Peterborough. These lands are covered by the Williams Treaty and Treaty 20, and I would just like to say miigwech to them for sharing these lands and this water with those of us who are newcomers. We have a few announcements, and I have a few people who are going to help me with the announcements. So when I call on you, if you could just unmute yourself. The first announcement has to do with, I guess it would be the first event that we've planned offline since COVID. We were planning for a celebration of the planet, which was in recognition of the second anniversary of the declaration of the climate emergency here in Peterborough. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we've had to postpone that. So keep your eyes open to our social media. We will let you know when that comes on board again. We have Katie Krelov, who is here to tell us about the Catchacoma Forest Stewardship Committee. Katie, can you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about your hike coming up at the end of September, please?
Sure. Thanks so much, Beth. Yeah, my name is Katie Krelov, and I work for an organization called the Wilderness Committee, which is a sort of an environmental NGO. And I've been working for the past 2 years to support a very local community in Catchacoma, which is about 45 minutes north of Peterborough, to get protection status for an identified rare old growth forest in that area, so just north of Catchacoma Lake. And you know, sort of two things like we've been working on is kind of going through figuring out the provincial process to actually get protection status and how that works. So some of you might know that Canada federally has committed to the UN's Biodiversity Convention target of protecting 30% of lands and waters by 2030. Currently, Ontario is at just under 11% protected and really hasn't moved the needle on that in the past 20 years. And so, you know, that's kind of part of it. The sort of political part of it is okay, well, how do we make this happen? And there's been a little bit of movement on that on the provincial level in the past 6 months, I would say. And then the other half is, you know, old growth and what old growth means in terms of carbon storage and sort of that side of it. So there's the biodiversity side and the carbon storage side and the just adding to protected areas side. So anyway, so we've been working on this forest. It's about 660 hectares. We did succeed over the past couple of years in getting some halt or reprieve on planned logging in the area. But right now we really need you know, a lot of local support for it as a potential protected area. So we've been holding public hikes, and there's one coming up on September 25th, which I'm here to tell you about. So the September 25th is a Saturday. The hike is going to be from 1 to 3 p.m. It's going to sort of focus on collecting biodiversity values. So we're going to be teaching people how to use iNaturalist and really like, so we have an iNaturalist project that we're going to be trying to add to, and also updating people on where we're at with the whole efforts to get protection status. Also teaching people how to recognize old growth and how to measure old growth, and, you know, talking about the old growth values in this forest. So yeah, we really hope that all of y'all will help to promote this hike. So it will be outdoors. I mean, we do want it to be big. Obviously, COVID things are on our radar, and we're going to sort of manage how many people we can have based on what happens with COVID, but it will be all outdoors. And so we're hoping that it can be fairly flexible. And I think I'll leave it at that. And Peter Courier, who's on this call, is also part of the Cachacoma Forest Stewardship Committee, which is sort of the local group that's been working on this.
Awesome.
Hey, Katie, I don't think you mentioned where you want people to meet. I noticed there was a meeting point for that.
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, there are promotional materials, so there's posters and stuff like that. We are hoping for people to like RSVP by emailing me, which is just katie@wildernesscommittee.org, and I can share that in the comments, just so that if we have to make any changes, we can update people. But yeah, and also because so I can share with you the map. But because it's on the 507. Which is north of Buckhorn, and it's just a parking lot about like 2 kilometers north of the Cachacoma Marina, which is on Lake Cachacoma. So it's about 45 minutes north of Peterborough.
Great, thank you. Well, one last announcement. This is coming at us from Al Slavin. Al, if you could unmute yourself.
Sure, and I'm going to share the screen as well to give me something you can actually see what I'm talking about. So you should see on the left something that's headlined "Vote for the Climate for Our Children."
Yeah.
Is it there, Connie? Can you see it? Good. Okay.
Yes.
So as everybody knows, 1 week from today is the federal election, and one of the big issues, as everyone also knows, and as everyone in this group is really concerned about, is the issue of climate and climate change. So what we've done is we put together a graph, a chart that shows the main policies of the 4 major parties in this area, and it points out some of the similarities and some of the differences, and hopefully that might help you in your decision making. I've put the link for this chart in the chat. It's the first item in the chat, so if you copy and paste that into your browser, you'll end up seeing this. What we're asking is that you share this as widely as possible with friends and neighbors. If you've got a printer and would like to print off some copies and deliver them locally, that can make a big difference. There are enough of us concerned about the climate in this area that if we all share our information, and this is one way to do it, we can actually make a difference. So one of the ways that we're doing this is we're handing out these flyers, these sheets, at the markets. The first one is coming up on Wednesday in 2 days, and then there are 2 on Saturday, the Lansdowne one and the downtown one. And we would like to get volunteers to help hand them out. It's a really easy thing to do. People going to the market are really receptive to this kind of thing, but they don't always know the information. So it's just a case of going up to someone and saying to them, would you like some information on the party platforms on climate? Here it is. And usually it's an easy sell, they'll take it. You don't have to talk about it in any detail at all. But if you would like to volunteer, if you could give Connie a ring, and I'm giving you a phone number, which I will also put into the chat, it's 705-743-6040, and tell her which of those markets that you could come to help out, hand out pamphlets. So I think that's all I need to say here.
Great, thank you. All right. Last announcement then is if you're interested in becoming a member for our grandchildren, the way that you can join is by going to our webpage, 4RGrandchildren.ca, and filling out a form. And then shortly after, you will hear from our lovely Connie, who will talk to you to find out what your particular area of interest is and how you'd like to become involved. So this evening, we are 7:15. The plan is that Sophie Monkman will be doing a presentation for us for about 20 to 30 minutes, followed by some time for questions, and followed by time for general conversation about climate, about forest therapy. We usually, kind of check in at 8 o'clock and say, oh, it's 8 o'clock. If you've got other plans, please, leave if you need to. But if you'd like to stay longer, you can. So this evening's presentation and facilitator of discussion is Sophie Monkman. Some of you might recognize her name. She is Drew's daughter. She grew up here in Peterborough and is living in Montreal, where she is leading forest therapy. She's been a forest therapy guide for 3 years and has completed 2 certifications in this field. So over to you, Sophie. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm super interested in hearing about what you have to tell us.
Thank you so much, Beth. And lovely to hear all of the announcements, even though I am over in Montreal. Lovely to see this community. And I've been hearing about 4RGrandchildren for years now through my dad. So thank you for the opportunity and for, the opportunity to talk about what I do, because there's lots of questions about it, and you might have heard it in mainstream news in the past few years. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it in this context and how it relates to the climate crisis and how I see it as an integral part of engaging people and galvanizing people into action. With that said, let me begin this screen share. Okay, how does that look?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So what is forest therapy and how can it be an avenue for climate and environmental action? Okay. So I always begin my walks or presentations acknowledging the land that I am on, land that is different than where many of you are in the Anishinaabe territory in Peterborough. So I am here in Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke, which is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, more commonly known as the Mohawk Nation. And the name for Montreal Tiohtià:ke actually means, in the Mohawk language, in Kanien'kehá:ka, where the group divided or parted ways. And so, as you can see, this is a satellite image of Montreal, and being an island is very accessible from the St. Lawrence River, and facilitated this place as being a gathering place. So before I dive in, I just would like, I'd invite each of you to just reflect for a moment on what your favorite place in the world is. There's no need to answer it out loud. And normally the first thought that comes to mind is the right one. So just go with that. And so with a show of hands, raise your hand if this is someplace in nature. So this is common and very telling of our innate connection and sense of ease in what I like to call the more than human world. Language is a really important thing in this practice, and just a very important thing when we're talking about the nature-human connection, because by using the word nature, we're inherently demarcating a difference, that there's a difference between humans and nature. And so I like to use the term more than human world when referring to the natural world. It's something that one of my favorite authors, Robin Wall Kimmerer, uses, and many people in nature connection fields and Indigenous knowledge keepers. Sorry, I may be young, but I'm not as smooth with this technology. Second question I have is to bring to mind a nature connection experience that has been meaningful to you in some way in your life. Now, again, then normally the first thought that comes to mind is the right one. And most of us, whether we already have a deep connection to the natural world or not, can easily evoke such memory. And just to reflect with yourself, I'm curious if this experience enhanced your connection to the natural world, or maybe deepened your sense of awe or respect for it, or maybe even piqued your curiosity about it. And so I'll allow you to just hold those memories, and maybe at the end we'll have time to delve more into that. But I just wanted to get you started to think about places in nature and experience in nature before I get into forest therapy, because it's an intrinsic part of it. So who am I? Beth gave a little introduction. I won't talk too much because that's not so important. Yes, Drew's daughter. I'm living in Montreal. I noted some of my certifications and affiliations that I've done in the field of forest therapy. So I was first certified with an organization in California, the ANFT, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. In 2019, I launched my own practice here in Montreal called Soft Earth Forest Therapy. And I guide walks right in downtown Montreal on Mount Royal and other urban parks. I'll get into that later, but accessibility is a big part, a core value of my practice. I also began working with the Global Institute of Forest Therapy. They're based in London, Ontario, as well as in Ireland. The founders are, in Canada and Ireland. And I was certified with them as well. Their certification process is a little bit different. And I'm also a member of a Quebec-based group, the Association of Shinrin-yoku Guides. And this quote, it's something that was on my sister's wall. I remember reading this when I was a teenager, and it really marked me. And finally now, on the cusp of 30, I'm realizing that I allowed the beauty of what I love to be what I do now. And maybe one day it'll pay the bills, but that's irrelevant. Okay, so what is forest therapy? So forest therapy is also known as forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku, and it's an immersive practice grounded in scientific research that helps people connect with natural environments through sensory experiences. So in exploring our relationships with the more than human world, we can strengthen our connections with the earth, ourselves, and one another. And among many things, forest therapy is a proven preventive health practice. Okay, so the roots of forest therapy. So forest therapy is based on the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, which translates directly as forest bathing. So it essentially means taking in the atmosphere of the forest. So this practice emerged in Japan in the 1980s as a response to high levels of stress and overwork in the population, and is founded on scientific research at the time of nature's therapeutic and stress relieving benefits. Not only that, it is also influenced by Japan's two major religions, Buddhism and Shintoism, that considered the forest as mystical places and saw and believed in the animacy of the natural world. So animacy meaning that all life on earth is indeed living, sentient, and possesses its own kind of intelligence and should be respected and engaged with in right relationship. So that is one of the foundational roots of this practice. So emerged there and then has evolved and traveled across the globe. Another important one, especially in the lineage with which I've studied with the ANFT and with GIFT, is the Indigenous lineage. In that in this practice, we engage an animistic worldview. We invite participants to engage this animistic worldview. So seeing all life on earth as living and sentient and possessing its own kind of intelligence, and should be respected and engaged with in that way. Not only that, but in the lineage with which I've studied, many Indigenous knowledge keepers and friends across Turtle Island, North America, have generously shared their teachings and have helped inform this practice. And one thing that I like to mention is that I truly believe that Indigenous people and communities, with their leadership, knowledge, and wisdom of engagement with the more than human world, are truly critical to the paradigm shifts that we need at this time. And lastly, one of the foundational roots is really that the way of being in this practice is an innate way of being for humans. There's a great term, biophilia, which was developed by biologist E.O. Wilson in the 1980s, that essentially means love of life. And that because we lived and evolved in nature, we have an innate desire to affiliate and with nature and other life forms, and that this is truly in our DNA. We evolved in nature for the majority of human history, and so our brains and DNA are really wired to connect. And so forest therapy is one avenue to explore this innate biophilia. Coming back to language again, so forest therapy, it's informed by these things. It's also informed by other nature connection modalities, such as John Young's, H. Shields practices. But fundamentally, speaking of language, it's putting a name to this innate way of being that's within all of us, however dormant it may seem, it's within all of us. Okay, yes. So what does a forest therapy walk entail? So normally it's 1.5 to 3 hours long. The distance covered is, wait a minute. Sorry, I'm embarrassingly bad at this. There's only 2 arrows and somehow I've gotten confused. Okay, no, I was on the right track, okay. So the forest therapy walks are normally 1.5 hours to 3 hours long, which can seem long at first, but they're very immersive and the time goes by quite quickly and gives us enough time for our bodies to really drop down and relax and experience the world around us. And so the distance covered is minimal. We're not on a hike. It's not a naturalist walk, although those are wonderful ways of being in nature. The focus is really on being and exploring what it feels like to be in the place you are. So being present versus always focusing on arriving somewhere else. Participants are guided through a series of what's called invitations, which are sensory-based activities. So connecting to your senses. We're not on the top floor. It's not an intellectual experience. It's really an embodied sensory experience to help people slow down, drop into their senses, and connect to their surroundings and follow their curiosity. And the walk pulses between individual time, exploring, and coming back together in a sharing circle when we have the opportunity to share what we're noticing. And that's a key part of the practice too, in that this practice really wants to avoid being yet another way that we further isolate from one another. That the cultural healing element is key to this, in that nature healing and cultural healing go hand in hand. And so sharing with one another what we're noticing, how we're connecting, is kind of repairing that human link, which is as integral as nature healing at this moment. And the walk ends with the sharing of tea, which is always an infusion of a local native medicinal plant, ideally harvested during the walk to fully integrate the forest and integrate the experience. So a few of the essential elements, some of which I've already mentioned, is that it's a sensory experience. So it's embodied, it's not an intellectual experience. It's about slowing down. The distance covered is minimal. Being in the present moment, focuses on our immediate surroundings. Orienting to pleasure. And so the focus is on the sensorial pleasures experienced in the present. And so if it feels good to breathe this air, if it feels good to, touch the needles of the spruce tree, if it smells good to smell the soil, all of this is to allow ourselves to enjoy it, and that enhances the benefits and the relaxing benefits of the experience, as well as wonder. Allowing curiosity and wonder to guide you. So really allowing your childlike curiosity and what I like to call soft fascination to guide you in that. It's an important element of being in nature mindfully, and that we experience this when we're relaxed in nature. When our gaze can soften, we can easily take in our surroundings, and our attention is captured effortlessly, and we allow ourselves to really follow our curiosity. Adopting an animistic worldview for the duration of the walk, like I mentioned before, participants are invited to engage with their surroundings in a way that with all beings in the forest, whether conventionally considered living or not, are given the status of beings with which people can interact with in meaningful ways. And so these are all invitations. It's not being, of course, imposed on anyone, but just to offer a different story and a different story of the intelligence of life and how that could open to deepening experiences in nature. And lastly, gratitude and reciprocity are important to recognize the gifts that we're receiving in every moment, especially in natural environments. And reciprocity being, even if we're giving, if we're receiving so much in these environments, then to give in return our gift of attention, or perhaps later down the road, caring for the place where we were, caring for that forest, caring for the trail, and the gift of developing a relationship. And one of my favorite quotes by Mary Oliver, who was a key instigator for me getting into this practice, was her poetry, her nature poetry, and the way that she shaped and informed how I saw the natural world through her poetic language. And so that's kind of a key, it encapsulates a key quality to forest therapy walks, is allowing the soft animal of your body to love what it loves. Another one of my favorite authors, David Abram, it's a great quote of his, that humans are tuned for relationship, our eyes, skin, tongue, oh, my screen's covering this, ears and nostrils, all our gates where our body receives the nourishment of otherness. At the end, we can talk about book recommendations and stuff. I'd be super happy to get all into that, because he's written amazing stuff about the more than human world. Okay, so the health benefits of a forest therapy practice. And so many of these benefits are broadly for, cover nature connection practices in general and spending quality mindful time in nature. And so during a forest therapy walk, our bodies become quite relaxed. We slow down and our bodies enter that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest state, which is when our bodies can really heal, rest, and repair themselves. As we all know, the pace of modern life and the stresses of everyday life has resulted that we're in the sympathetic nervous system a lot of the time. So that fight, flight, freeze, and that sympathetic state is really working on overdrive. And with so much emphasis on cognitive processes and being stressed, so many of us suffer from overstimulated minds and disconnect from our bodies and our senses and the simple sensory pleasures of being alive. And therefore, being disconnected from our bodies and our senses disconnects us from the life around us and the relationships that we can make with all the life that surrounds us and supports us and allows our lives to be possible. And so we need time during the day when our parasympathetic nervous systems are dominant, which in modern culture, unfortunately, in our busy lives is almost never. And so many of the health benefits from this practice emerge from the fact that our bodies are in this relaxed parasympathetic state. And being in nature is an irrefutable form of preventive medicine. And so there is a wealth of scientific study and research that substantiates all of this, as well as all of these incredible health benefits, both physiological and mental. And so the first being a reduction in stress, and so feeling more relaxed. And this is really one of the most important things, because chronic stress makes us more vulnerable to disease and is one of the leading causes of illness in modern society. And so many of the benefits come from the fact that our cortisol levels have gone down. In Japan, on some walks, they actually take they do a test of cortisol levels at the beginning and at the end of the walk. And the results are pretty significant. Not only that, but reduced blood pressure, reduced heart rate, accelerated recovery from illness or surgery from being in nature. You may have heard of a key study done in Pennsylvania, I believe, where there were a group of people who were recovering from the same surgery, half of whom had a view from their hospital window onto a forest, onto trees, and the other half had a view looking onto a brick wall. And the findings were really statistically significant in that those who had a view on the trees recovered several days faster. They used less pain medication and less potent medication as opposed to narcotics, and were generally had more of a positive disposition in the nurse's notes. And so many studies such as these have been replicated, but that is one that is cited quite often. Strengthened immune system. So of course, stress and our immune system go hand in hand. And so through the state of relaxation, the immune system is strengthened because stress inhibits immune function. And another element of that is phytoncides, which I'll speak about afterwards, which are antimicrobial compounds emitted from conifer trees that enhance our immune system. I'm aware of time and I can go so deep into all of these, but I'm kind of blasting through, so I apologize for the speed. Improved sleep, higher energy levels, improved ability to concentrate, which is significant, especially for participants who experience ADD or ADHD, especially for children, and has such significant positive influences on their life that they could cease taking medication. Improved memory, mental clarity, increased sense of creativity, stabilized mood and cognition, decreased feelings of anxiety and depression, and general improved sense of well-being. And so the key elements in nature that contribute to these benefits, so you might be asking yourself, okay, but how, what's the mechanism that makes us so relaxed, that reduces our, our heart rate and blood pressure and all of this, and leads us to feeling these more creative and feelings of awe and wonder. The first being phytoncides. So there's some pretty impressive research being done. One of the foremost scholars in this, Dr. Ching Li in Japan, has done several studies, one of which, a significant one in 2006. He spent 3 days in a forest in Japan with 12 men and scientifically proved that spending time in a coniferous rich forest, and I believe that oak trees as well have high levels of phytoncides, can increase our natural killer cells, which are white blood cells that attack virus infected cells, and strengthen our immune system. And so just spending 3 days in the forest can increase these levels for up to 30 days. And a 3-hour walk, which is what I offer, increases the natural killer cells if we're in a phytoncide-rich forest for a week. And so, some people dismiss some of these things as woo-woo and, oh, you're breathing, magical things in the forest, but it's really substantiated in the research, which is very exciting. So there's science to back up why that forest air smells so good and feels so good. It's really having a physiological effect in our bodies. And one thing I forgot to mention is that phytoncides are released by trees when they detect a threat of some kind. And so it's really, the phytoncides are the tree's immune system. And so whether it's a fungus, whether it's a beetle, whether it's any kind of threat, they release phytoncides to inform, because trees are all in communication, of course, the World Wide Web, of this threat. And so since we evolved in natural areas, the phytoncides have a similar effect on our bodies by enhancing our immune systems. Other key elements is the soundscape. And so lots of amazing studies about the impact of bird song, the wind rustling through the trees, the sound of running water in streams or brooks, all are really amazing for our mental health and our nervous system. Fractal structures in nature. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail because time's slipping away, but we can get into these later. I can send notes or speak further into all of these elements after. Negative ions when you're near running water. The sense of awe is another thing. Of course, sunlight, which we know well in Canada has such significant benefits on our well-being and physiologically, and soil, the smell of soil. So one of the goals of this practice is really that it's not just a one-off kind of cool experience you have, but that its qualities are really incorporated into people's day-to-day lives. So that's remembering to slow down or stop, which stopping is really a radical act, it seems, in our modern life. Paying attention, connecting to our bodies and our senses, being present, engaging with the life around us, following curiosity, and continuing our own journeys of deepening our connections with the earth and the mysteries and the life around us in our own way. So I like to include a few testimonials just to show that people have really had significant experiences on these walks. And it's not to, tout my own horn. It's really one of the key themes of this practice is that, of course, I'm not, a therapist, psychotherapist, but that I am a guide, a forest therapy guide, and I help open the doors of connection for participants, and that it's really the forest and natural environments that have the therapeutic elements, and people have their own experiences. And so, people have had transformative experiences, quite emotional as well. Sometimes grief arises. You can feel deeply connected and grounded. I have a regular who comes to many of my walks who is still recovering from her cancer treatments and who deeply feels the positive benefits in her day-to-day life. And her sister who came said that she sleeps so much better, she feels grounded, present, happier. And so these are just a few little excerpts of experiences that people have had. And another anecdote that I like to share is that I've had several forest rangers on my walks. I led a walk in the UK with a forest ranger who had spent his entire career in the forest where I was guiding him. And he said, I work here every day. I've been working here for years, for decades. And at the end, he had never quite seen or experienced the forest or looked at trees in quite that way before, and was connecting in an entirely new way. And so this is the gift of slowing down and the gift of attention, and points to all of the different ways that we can be in the world and that we can connect with the life around us. And so it's pretty cool. And one thing that I like to emphasize as well is that this practice is for everyone. You don't have to have a profound relationship to the natural world or be a naturalist or meditate or have any specific knowledge. This is an innate connection. We're all wired to connect, whether it feels, deeply buried or dormant. It's really within all of us. So a few things that drew me to this practice. It was really at the intersection of many of my interests. So mindfulness, nature connection, Japanese culture, indigenous ways of knowing and connecting to nature. It's a preventive mental and physical health practice, embodiment practice, working outdoors, eco-psychology, so many things. As I mentioned before, it's really an accessible practice. So it's practice for everyone, regardless of age, knowledge, physical capability. And what was important for me is to also address the dynamics of privilege and accessibility in natural areas. in that it is for everyone, but not everyone feels that nature is for them or these spaces are for them as well, even though it's within all of us by virtue of being human. It's a path of environmental engagement and activism. And that's one of the main things that brought me to this, which I'm going to dive into. It was a means to channel really my own climate anxiety and environmental grief and the future in a way that felt really healing and positive. As a side note, I actually applied to do this training after a Work That Reconnects workshop with Joanna Macy, who some of you may know, which is basically a several-day workshop processing environmental grief and processing how to channel the paralysis and the overwhelm of what's happening into a productive way. And so that felt like a timely coincidence. And the last thing which I'm going to speak more about is that it's really a way to help people feel, understand, and care about what is happening to our earth and therefore to ourselves, because we're not disconnected, and a means to galvanize them into action in their day-to-day lives. So these quotes embody a lot of what drew me to practice. In the end, we will conserve only what we love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And Jacques Cousteau, people protect what they love. And so, you know, I got to thinking before getting into this field, if people protect what they love and understand and have been taught, then perhaps the place where I can engage in meaningful work for our earth is to help in establishing that connection. And it's not so much teaching, but rather in a forest therapy context, helping establish that connection, inviting connection with the natural world. And that it's from that place that we may begin to care for the world around us and engage with what is being lost. And that element of relationship and connection is the key part of that. And so this is a segue into how this really connects to the climate crisis. And how do we get people to care about what's happening to our earth? I'm sure this is a common topic for our grandchildren. What is it going to take to get people to care about what's happening to our earth and of course to ourselves? And so as I mentioned, the anxiety and fear and depression I felt in regards to the climate crisis, I reflected for years on how, you know, what channel can really get people to act and care for what is being lost. And it all came back down to the simplest and most foundational act, which is being in close relationship with the natural world. And so forest therapy offered an avenue for this. Again, it's accessible. There's no knowledge required. It's open to all. We're wired to connect and care, even if it feels dormant. Another thing is that climate change can often feel a bit abstract. It's a bit of an abstraction for some, and it can be difficult to connect to and understand a crisis as immense and daunting as this, and really understand what's at stake and what's being lost when you're not connected to the natural world and the environment around you. And so the abstraction of climate change makes paths to action difficult, or feeling that you have agency and are doing something. And so connecting to the natural world and in a practice such as forest therapy is not abstract. It involves direct presence to the reality of life around you, engaging with it. It requires attention. So it's really the opposite of abstraction. And it's when we create that relationship and connection with the natural world around us that we can connect at a larger scale to what's at stake and care for these environments. But I really think the foundational part is that human nature connection. And that's what engages and will galvanize people into action. So that was one central pathway that got me into this. And I truly see this way as my form of climate and environmental activism. Some people can see this pausing and, a contemplative practice such as this as, as not being radical enough. But I really believe that pausing at a time like this is a radical thing, even if it's for a moment, because it's in pausing and connecting that we really realize what's present for us all the time, and that's supporting us. And it's from that place and the benefits from a practice such as this that can give us the support and tools we need to help us feel grounded, and to allow us to act from a place of wholeness and meaning and connection in our lives, and not necessarily from anger or fear or lack or disconnection. But don't get me wrong, we need all of it. We need anger, we need all of those emotions. And when you connect to life and allow this to impact the way you live your life, it reverberates around you in ways that you can't substantiate in positive ways. And so, people ask, what can I do? Whoever you are and whatever your skills or interests or gifts, there's a need and place for everyone. And so for a long time, I felt that I was too sensitive or too soft, or I didn't study biology, or I wasn't as good of a naturalist as my dad. And so I didn't know how, what pathway I could take, because I cared so much and I had this deep connection. And so we need everyone. So I like to use the metaphor of, well, it's a metaphor, but it's also material because we're made of elements, but of the elements, in that we need, the qualities of earth. So we need people that are rooted and steadfast, that are solid in their values. We need people that have more air qualities, that are creative, intuitive, that are amazed by wonder and beauty, and that share that. We need that fire and the passion, intensity, and anger, and the qualities of water as well, allowing emotion and flow and wisdom. And so whoever you are and whatever gifts you have, just know that it doesn't have to fit a certain box, and that however you are engaging reverberates, and that we need people with all of these qualities. And so I like to think of forest therapy as soft activism, but I believe that it's potent activism as much as being on, tying yourself to a tree like at Fairy Creek that I've been checking in on every day. And this is one of my favorite quotes. The times are urgent, let us slow down. So this is an indigenous Nigerian philosopher, Dr. Bayo Akomolafe. He's a public intellectual and writer, and just general brilliant man. And he says a few things that I would like to share. That slowing down is not a function of speed. It's not, let's take a break, let's go on vacation, let's leave it all behind. But that slowing down is a function of deepening awareness. It's not a function of privilege. It's a function of intimacy with a world that is alive. It means listening deeply, following the sights, smells, and sound of the world, a world which is now no longer mute and dumb as modernity would have us believe it is. It's alive, it's alien, and wanting us to do more than just save ourselves. And I just wanted to mention that the citations in my presentation are from Gifts Forest Therapy Handbook. And that's all for me. Would love to take any questions and begin a conversation. Thank you so much for your attention and time, and my technological bumps.
You did a great job. Sophie, what really stands out for me is that idea that that we evolved in nature for most of humanity. We lived in nature. We're wired for that connection, and science is starting to catch up and explain to us why it feels so good for us to be in nature. And our life is so quick. There's so many distractions, and many of us really do need help to slow down, like to not be so distracted, to just be given permission to be childlike again, and to, like, as you said, to smell the pine needles and lie on the ground and look at the leaves, to be to be grateful, to be mindful, to be curious, to connect with that awe and wonder that, you know, anybody who has grandchildren sees their grandchildren do that. And then that idea that the immune system of the trees is also having an impact on my immune system. Like that's just so cool. And thank you for telling us about the phytoncides. Now I know what they're called. That's great. And also for sharing your personal journey. You know, all of, as you said, the intersection of all of these interests that you have that came together. And this is a place where, you know, you can share your gifts and your knowledge from just such a wide and diverse background. And that the love of nature is what can motivate us to do the, you know, whatever the work is, whatever our gifts are. I think a lot of us struggle, and in the conversations we have around, well, not around the table so much with for our grandchildren, but over Zoom, as everyone is, you know, wondering how do we get people motivated? How do we help people? How do we make a difference with this climate change? And central to that, I think, forest therapy offers is that sense of slowing down and taking a pause. That's such a radical thing. And so, like, what's the center that you're working out of? I love that. And that all of our gifts are required moving forward. And so how do we understand for ourselves personally? I remember listening to Heather Eaton. She was a professor at St. Paul's University, and she said that when there's a crisis, the Western world like gets active. Let's do something, like right away, we got to do something. And that the Eastern world says, wait, let's just slow down for a little while. So thank you so much. In terms of questions, I see someone asked, do you know if there's anyone in Peterborough that offers forest therapy?
Yes, yeah, I do. I am forgetting her name off the top of my head, but if there's a means of, I can email it to you and share it with the group. Yeah, absolutely. My dad might know her name.
Dad? You're muted, Mr. Monkman. Drew Monkman.
Yeah, I will let you know if I can find it. There definitely is a woman who's doing it, though. Yes.
So we can post the name on our For Our Grandchildren website under the 4RGMeets link at the same time as we post the recording of this presentation, so that people can watch this again if they'd like to look at some of those slides again.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the question in Ottawa. Yes, Kate. Yeah, there are a few guides in Ottawa. Again, I can put you in contact, or you can even Google, I think, Forest Therapy Ottawa. It's a woman named Andrea Przemowski offers forest therapy in Ottawa.
So Kate is asking us, I'd like to know about the grief therapy course about climate that you mentioned, Sophie.
Yeah, and the work that reconnects. Amazing. I don't see. Where is Kate? I'm trying to see a face here. Oh, there you are. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Joanna Macy at all, but everything that she's written, she's a Buddhist scholar and eco-philosopher, amazing woman. She's in her 90s now, who has written several books about ecological grief and processing this, all from a Buddhist perspective, but she has been a hardline environmental activist her whole life. So Joanna Macy, the work that reconnects, there's normally branches in all over North America, all over the world, and they offer workshops in the pre-COVID times in person, but I'm sure they have stuff online now. But it's really powerful stuff, and highly recommend all of her books as well to explore on your own.
The work that reconnects.
The work that reconnects.
I think that's the name of one of her books too, isn't it, Sophie?
I don't know if any of that. She might have a book, Work That Reconnects. I know that Coming Back to Life is one of them.
Okay. Anyway, you can Google it. You'll see. Someone else is wondering about, is there, oh, okay, there we go. Scott put in a link to the Work That Reconnects. Amy is wondering if there's a Toronto connection. I know there's somebody out of Toronto who's running forest therapy with I think it's called Eco Wisdom is the name of the website that you can go to in Toronto. She's offering online during COVID. I don't know if she's offering in person.
Yeah, there are many in Toronto. I think, researching forest bathing, forest therapy, Toronto. A friend of mine who I trained with, Mark Michaud, is in Toronto leading walks. I know that. I'm not sure under what handle he uses for social media or his website, but yeah, we're everywhere.
Sophie, Rosemary here.
Yeah.
When I listen to how integrated you are with both sides of your brain, I'm reminded, well, I have a conviction that science has gone about as far as it can go in terms of transforming public attitudes. And so I turn to philosophy, and which you integrate so well, and poetry and theology. There are great Christian leaders too in eco-theology.
Thomas Berry.
We need not become Buddhist, but we need to read Thomas Berry and Parker Palmer, and the medieval mystics like Mechthild. But what I appreciate so much is the way you easily pay honor to both those ways of being, thinking, feeling,
and I think you mean
dreaming.
Heart. Rosemary, I think you're saying heart.
Yeah. Maybe that's the integrating power. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. You're articulate.
That was wonderful. I always said to everybody when I didn't feel good, I was heading to the water. I knew it healed. I just didn't know the specific name for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And water, I studied, in the specific, domain of forest therapy and the therapeutic benefits of being in forest environments. But of course, this extends to, ocean therapy, desert therapy, all of it, right? It's all one. There's an amazing book about the human connection to water as well. It's called The Blue Mind. It's a great book. If you
Sophie, I was in Ottawa this past COVID winter, homeschooling with my daughter, her 3 young children, and we went for forest walks and did much of the curriculum in the forest. And I think that's what got us through. And you could just feel the children slowing down. In the house, it was bedlam all the time. And then we would get out in the forest and everyone would calm down. And you could just feel sort of this cathedral-ish feeling of beautifulness and calmness. And it was so restorative during a hard time.
Absolutely. Yeah. The cathedral word. I feel that way a lot in forests with more mature trees, and it does feel cathedral-like. And for so many people, it is their, whatever spiritual, pathway, religion, whatever language you use, connecting to something deeper. And as Rosemary was alluding to, I think that is integral to, a lot of the wisdom going forward, while of course maintaining, a critical mind and using science, but using science to enhance the sense of wonder. And it's something that my dad always likes to say, that the facts and the science doesn't take away from it, but it enhances the sense of awe, but it doesn't have to be all of it, right? So I lost my train there. But yes, Kate, yeah, during COVID, I mean, we see this, it's resonating more than ever with people, because we realized for the past year and a half, you know, where we could see our family, where we could see friends, what we could do was spending time outside. And so for so many people with, you know, kids or people that hadn't spent much time in nature, realizing slowly like, oh, this feels really good. And maybe they didn't have a nature connection, you know, relationship before. Maybe they were scared or they didn't know how. And so, you know, as you know, the provincial parks are you know, overflowing. You can't get a campsite. All of this, it's like, it's again, it's tapping into what's innate in us. And you know, one of the few silver linings of COVID is that I think it's helped people to recognize that and to realize that you know, they are home here, and that it provides that sense of comfort in really unsettling times.
I'm just going to jump in here. It's 8:05, and often at 8 o'clock we remind people that if you are would like to head out to something else, go ahead. If you'd like to stick around and chat a little bit more, you're welcome. I have a little anecdote for you, Sophie. We have a campsite up in the Halliburton Forest, and we bring, like, people will come up and visit. And on a Friday night, they'll show up and we'll say, hey, you want to go for a little canoe down the lake? And they get in the canoe and they're just like they're just going, they're just giving her, right? They've just got off the highway. They maybe came through Toronto. They're just like, and then they get like 2/3 of the way down the lake, and it's only a 2-kilometer long lake, and they just like start to slow, and then like you can watch them physically, their shoulders will drop and their paddling slows down and they start to breathe a little bit more deeply. And it's gotten to the point where I love to take people out on their first night and just watch that happen, because invariably it does.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's what I mentioned, you know, sharing some testimonials, you know, just emphasizing this isn't about me, you know, it's I can hold a container of experience to allow people to connect and have this experience. And so much of the practice, yes, is that permission, is giving themselves that time and space to drop in, whether it's canoeing, whether it's on a hike, whether it's stopping, whether it's sitting in your backyard on your balcony in downtown Montreal where I live. You know, it's accessible to us if we give ourselves the permission. And sometimes the hardest part is stopping and allowing ourselves to do that. Having a sit spot practice. I didn't talk about sit spot, but sit spot is one of the core parts of forest therapy walks, which is really just finding a place in nature or with a view on nature. It can be on your balcony or with a plant in your house if you're in quarantine. But having a place where you sit and simply slow down and take in the world around you, and giving yourself a generous 15-20 minutes where you're not doing anything else and you're not connected to your phone or even journaling or reading. And that those effects can, you know, all of those benefits I outlined, maybe not all of them, but some of them definitely awe, you know, sitting under a tree for 15 minutes, looking up at the canopy, that those feelings of awe and well-being emerge in us when we slow down, and it's effortless because we're wired for it, that there's this resonance between the fractal structures of the trees and leaves and the fractal structures in our brains that resonate and just naturally, you know, calm down our nervous system. So it's in us, you know, it's not like mastering, you know, Zen Buddhism or anything and spending 10 days in silence, you know, meditating to achieve, you know, nirvana, but that we can access that peace and sense of well-being if we give ourselves the permission.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions?
I'll just say one thing. The woman's name in Peterborough, and Sophie will correct me if I'm wrong, is Christina Domsick. Does that sound right, Sophie? Yeah. And she has a website and a Facebook page, and her website is called rootedheart.ca, and I put it in the chat as well. So
awesome, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, it's quite amazing how many people are doing this practice now. So just a matter of doing a little research to find who they are, where they are.
Yeah.
Sophie, it's Sandy.
Oh, sorry.
It's Sandy here, and I resonated with everything you say, and I so appreciate you doing this evening. it brought me to my many years of wilderness canoe camping and portaging, where on that first trip, you got your canoe and your packs and you just want to get to the end of the portage in the next lake. And then on the way back for the rest of it, you slow right down and you just appreciate everything that you can see on the portage and back into the woods. I remember seeing Indian pipe for the first time on a portage and being so excited, what is this? And looking it up and so on. And I was just thinking about how important it is, because you need that energy for the next trip over the portage, to slow down and just enjoy that walk back and take everything in. And so that part of you saying your walks don't cover a big distance, and you don't need to cover a big distance to slow. The other thing is labyrinths. The beauty of a labyrinth, a natural labyrinth, where you're just slowly working your way into the circle and enjoying the fresh air and everything that's around you. And that slowing down, as you say, is just so vital to our well-being. So thank you. And my claim to fame in your family, Sophie, is I'm Ash Naylor's aunt.
Okay.
My maiden name is Naylor. Just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah. I know the Nailers. Well, Julia knows them better, but yeah.
Sorry, Sophie, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I really enjoyed that, and I will certainly try to see if there is anyone in the Peterborough area. I would love to do that. But I also wanted to say that we've been privileged enough, and I say that that word very sincerely, to walk with Beth and Scott McKinley and through a forest a couple of times, and bird watching another time. But they do force you to slow down. You know, they say, let's go for a hike. And for me, a hike, okay, we got to go. We got to motor, you know, like it's all about the heart rate. And it isn't, but they force you to slow down. Well, they don't force you. You just do, because you just see it. You watch them and they just appreciate absolutely everything that they see, everything on the floor of the forest, everything in the trees and the canopy and the sky and nature. And it's absolutely, it does wonders. It's very refreshing. It's a treat. And if they ever decide to do this forest therapy, they would be magnificent at it.
Oh,
They
yeah.
really would. They
I've
would.
been seriously thinking about it, Beverly, actually.
I keep
Well,
asking them to do some walk.
Beth, you would be marvelous, and Scott too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Now, I have to say, walking at that pace drives our children crazy because we stop to take pictures of everything.
Yes.
It's like my mom and dad.
They
Yeah.
like our one daughter wants to run the trail, and we're like, no, we want to actually like look at everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm guilty of that. I just go, I just motor. But when you're with someone who says, well, no, look at this, and I've missed all of those things, but you point them out and you say, well, you just make people realize that there's just so much to appreciate. Anyway, yeah, I think this whole thing is wonderful, Sophie, and I do hope that I have an opportunity to take advantage of that. And if Beth gets on board, and then hey, I'll get out there for sure. I would love it.
Absolutely. I would love to go bird watching with, anytime I see my dad. We live far away, but, I'd love to do more of that as well. This isn't to say all these ways of being in nature are so important. And of course, all these, health benefits in the sense of awe and wonder and groundedness, of course, can come from, a slower hike or a walk or being more quiet, or of course, because bird watching is incredibly meditative. And, yeah, that's probably why I'm doing this now, is because my dad took me out bird watching as a kid. I still can't, identify that many birds, but I see them, I find them.
But it depends who you're with, Red Drew. Some people are really intense about birding.
They're not so meditative.
Yeah. Sophie, you'll be glad to know that 4RG is going to be planning in the spring, hopefully a very large tree event. And hopefully we can, all the science and different things we're learning about trees can be, part of some of the presentations. So it's good for people to learn, more of these things that
Suzanne Simard, who was one of the pioneers of that research, just came out with a book actually on that, the wood wide web. She was one of the pioneering researchers out in Vancouver about the mycelial networks underground that connect the root systems and help the trees communicate. She just came out with a new book. I've got it's the 20th book on my bedside table to read.
What did you say it was called, Sophie?
I don't remember the name, but it's Suzanne Simard.
Oh, I know that woman. Yeah. She's the BC forester, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I find that the older I get and the more time I spend outdoors, the deeper this gets all the time. Like it just keeps getting deeper. And Scott and I were reading Braiding Sweetgrass. That was a really great book because Robin Kimmerer, she's Indigenous, and just to read her descriptions of what she sees when she is in nature. And that sense of connectedness, the animism that everything is, kin, everything is family. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and she, as was it Rosemary mentioned before, is just pairing that, two different brains or two different ways of knowing, and that's what Robin Wall Kimmerer does so beautifully, because she's a biologist, but is Anishinaabe, and so incorporates Indigenous ways of knowing with scientific ways of knowing. She's a professor, and so how to incorporate both of those. And as so much of science is proving what Indigenous people have known for thousands of years.
Yes.
And so these things can't be dismissed easily, and that's why I mentioned it in my presentation as well. There's so much to be learned and so much being lost. Highly recommend all of her work and many other Indigenous scholars, as who balance both of these ways of knowing so beautifully.
Yeah, I'll just follow up a little bit on that. Every September, I think of her because towards the beginning of the book, she talks about the special beauty of goldenrod growing beside New England aster. And apparently when she was applying, I believe, to the School of Botany at university, she brought that up and was so excited about this beauty. I think sort of intimated, or was kind of getting at the question of, this is something I would love to study, with the beauty of plants.
And let me chime in. She says, why? Oh no, now I'm forgetting now that I've interrupted you.
I believe that whatever professor she was speaking to said, well, what we're doing in this school has nothing to do with beauty. We're all about hard facts. That was a number of years ago, and I'm sure that's changed. And I know that most scientists feel that deep sense of connection astronomy, or probably more strongly than anyone. And they especially have a sense of all that's being lost. But I just say pay attention to that special beauty of New England aster and goldenrod, because they're both more or less at their peak right now.
Why is it that they're so beautiful and that they grow alongside one another? And the professor said, if you want to study that, go to
art school or something. Yeah. Well, I think it's 20 after. Sorry.
Oh yeah, just don't be asking philosophical questions about beauty. So
it's 20 after 8. I just like to say thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing your time and your wisdom and your experience with us. It's such an important perspective, I think. And I think most of us who spend time concerned about the environment, have some connection, but can be deepened. And it's a good reminder to slow down again, to step back and slow down and not get so caught up in the emotional, concerns about what we see going on around us. And, back to that Rumi quote that you had, I wrote it down because I love that one. Let the beauty of what you love be what you do. I think maybe that would be a good quote to conclude our evening meeting with.
Thanks, Sophie.
Well,
Thank you
so
very
much
much.
for your time.
Great job, Sophie.